Welcome back to the Bordas and Bordas hotline of the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call. Bob Pompeani with you. Call the number, or you can tweet me at KDPomp. Vontaze Burfict leaves the game limping off the field tonight, so I'm sure a lot of Steeler fans happy that it's not gone his way so far. He was fined $112,000 yesterday, which is kind of a late fine by the NFL. Normally, we find out these things on Friday. Was not suspended at all, and you may disagree, but those hits by themselves not necessarily warranted a suspension, but given his history, they certainly did, because he has been a frequent violator, a frequent suspended guy, someone who's been fined an awful lot. I think this brings to $415,000 the amount of money he's been fined since 2012. So based on his history, he deserves something more. He got $112,000. Let's go out to the lines. They're buzzing tonight. Waylon in Washington, you're up first. Hey, Waylon, what's on your mind?
Hi, Bob. You're looking sharp as always.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Hey, I'm not Einstein, but I did go to University of Pittsburgh at Greensburg with Jim Wexell.
Well, that gives you some credibility there. That's pretty good company to keep.
Yeah, he's a good guy. Yes. However, the NFL's going to London to play football when, like the monopoly, the economics could be going to their own cities or even places like Oregon or Iowa. Any thoughts about that or insight?
Well, you know what? I think they have the American market, obviously. It's the #1 sport going. And I think they're just trying to globalize the brand to make people around the world want it. And if it means, even if it doesn't mean landing a franchise there, and there's some people who think that is the goal, I just don't think it's feasible from a travel standpoint. I think they're trying to get into that marketplace to sell jerseys and to push product overseas. And the way to do that is to show up there once in a while. So it would be kind of cool to go to some other U.S. cities just to give them a taste of the NFL product as well. But I don't think that's going to be part of their plan. Thanks, man. Appreciate it, Waylon. Let's go out to Al in the West End. What's up, Al? How are you?
Hey, Bob. How you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for calling.
Hey, thank you. It's just funny how the national media and fans and local at the beginning of this season or Ben and AB can't connect, Le'Veon Bell this, what's wrong with the defense, Tomlin this. After tonight's game, guess who's going to be in first place?
Yep. That's what I said. It's a long season, and when they were 0-1-1, man, we took a lot of questions here about getting rid of things, changing up. It's must this, must that. It really isn't, because the NFL is a week-to-week proposition where parity still rules the roost, and you're going to see it. Look at the AFC South, for example. That's an awful division. We saw Jacksonville look awful again today. They benched Blake Bortles. Tennessee loses again. Houston's on top of that division, and they certainly have their warts. So by the end of the year, if you win your division at 10-6, you're probably doing a pretty good job. And I think that was my record for the Steelers. It may now be altered because of the tie, but it's a long year. And they still can have ups and downs along the way where you doubt what they're going to be able to do. Or you think, the rest of the division just stinks, which I do right now.
Thanks, Bob.
All right, thank you. Appreciate the call. 412-575-2600. We go down to Alan in the South Side. Alan, you're up next. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for taking my call.
You're welcome. Anytime.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment about that Burbick situation. I think the reason why it took so long was because they were debating on if they should suspend him or give him a fine.
I don't think there's much to debate there. I don't know why it took all week.
I think they decided to give him enough rope to hang himself. I think the next time it happens, he might be gone.
I think they would have done that. He's had enough rope for a long period of time. I just think, I don't know what in the world they need to see other than another lawsuit that comes in on a player down the road who may say, you know what, Vontaze Burfict messed me up, I have CTE, and now I'm going to sue the NFL. Given how they're trying to get rid of the hits and the headshots, how this guy continues to get a pass is just, to me, beyond me. I don't understand it. He is the poster child for hits that lead to concussions. And that is the one thing they want to get out of the game, and yet they continue to give him and enable him to play when, in fact, they should have sent a hardline message. I applauded the NHL when they did that with Tom Wilson. They're finally saying, we ain't tolerating this anymore. You get this, it's 20 games, you're going to have to deal with it. He's since appealed it. But the bottom line is they're sending statements. I think the NFL has to do the same. Given what they want to do in terms of getting rid of this, absolutely they need to take that stand. And they haven't, surprisingly, with him. Seth in Latrobe is on the sports call right now. Hey, Seth.
Oh, hey, Bob. Hey, this is Jeff from Latrobe. Yeah, okay, I've been watching the game just until your show came on, and it looks like right now the Tennessee is going through like a walkthrough right now against the Bungles, okay? Why is it that last week, okay, I know in the NFL a win is a win is a win, but why is it that the Bungles have to find a way to lose the game rather than the Steelers win it? And this week it's just like, you know, like I said, you're looking at something different here, you know?
What you're looking at is a really good young quarterback in the making in Pat Mahomes, and he's been able to, with a strong arm, find guys, locate passes where only their receivers can get them. He continues to do that tonight. This is a guy who in year number 2 hasn't started until this year. Boy, has he been good. And right now you can argue he's the player of the year in the NFL based on, you know, where things were at the beginning of the season. They got an offense that's dynamic. When you talk about Tyreek Hill and the speed, what he does, taking over the top, down the middle, he takes people with him. It opens up lanes underneath for big tight ends like Kelsey. It also provides running room for Kareem Hunt, who tonight put on a show on that one run where Kirkpatrick totally missed him, and then he leapfrogs and hurdles another guy without much of a run-up to that. I was surprised how athletic that play was, and you know, after he was hit and yards after contact, pretty good stuff. So they're going to be a tough team. And I think they gained some confidence, as strange as this sounds, last week in New England. When they were down, they came back and should have beaten New England in New England. They didn't, but they gave them all they can handle on the road. That was actually a good night, I thought, for them, even win a loss. All right, let's go out to line 5. Clinton Altuna's up. What's up, Clint?
Not much. How you doing? Hey, I'm going to switch up a little bit, talk about the World Series and everything, but personally, you know, you had Milwaukee. Okay, they didn't make it there, but they got to Game 7 against the Dodgers. But in my opinion, I didn't see much separation, I guess, so to speak, like the talent-wise between them and the Pirates. I think I was thinking of them last night. If a team like Milwaukee, and I know they made a lot of improvements before the season, they added some key players and everything, but if a team like that can get in there and make a run at the World Series, you know, what's holding Pittsburgh back? I mean, I don't know. I don't think they were that much better than Pittsburgh this year.
Well, what they did in the offseason was far better than the Pirates, and I think that's what separated the two teams. Number one, Clint, they went out and they gave a lot of money to Lorenzo Cain, who is an outfielder they coveted, they wanted, and they gave him over $80 million. Number two, they gave up 4 organizational prospects to get Christian Yelich. You might remember last year the Marlins were having a little sale on their outfield, which I thought was the best outfield in all of baseball. They traded Stanton to the Yankees, Ozuna goes to the Cardinals, and Yelich goes to Milwaukee. The Pirates could have been in on that. I like Christian Yelich, but then you got to pay him too because he's going to be the MVP of this league. You have to get over the aversion of paying people big money, and right now they haven't been able to do that. Milwaukee's bullpen's good. Their starting pitching, not so much in my opinion, but the Pirates have a lot of pitching depth, I think, right now. They need to add some hitting because right now that lineup looks a little suspect to me.
Yeah. Do you like Boston or the Red Dodgers?
I would think I'd like Boston just because of the season they had, but both teams are loaded with talent. And whoever, thank you, Clint, whoever gets hitting. But Boston, man, you start Chris Sale in Game 1. That's pretty good against Clayton Kershaw, I think, at this point. Although Kershaw pitched last night, I would imagine he would be available for game number 1, but you never know. If not, it'll probably be Rich Hill. So that should be an interesting World Series, but 2 of the highest paid teams in baseball in terms of their payrolls. And I've always maintained, you can tell me that you can't buy a World Series, but you can buy a place in the playoffs almost every year. And the Dodgers are that team. They haven't won a World Series in a long time. And people say, well, look, even with all that money, they can't win. Well, what they do guarantee themselves, a spot, a chance, a legitimate chance, more so than every other team that refuses to spend. And that's why I hate baseball's economic system. We're going to take a break, come back with more right here on the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call, Pittsburgh CW.